your video or your taping?
Yeah, I just got it.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, hello, everybody. Glad y'all are here. We're talking about Matthew Lippman's Mesmerizingly Sadly Beautiful. And of course, not his book, American Chew, but that's another one. Or Salami Jew. And actually, I've got another one of his books in my office. But I think this is his 6th book. Actually, there's one of them I don't have, A Little Gut Magic. But so KB, you usually start us off with something about the cover. If you want to do that, that's fine. Or not.
Well, you know, I always appreciate trees and birds, so I'm happy with the cover.
I wonder if there's any kind of connection between the cover and anything inside.
Well, the whole environmental, ecological, you know, the humans are there, the birds and the trees are there, the grass is there, and our responsibility throughout a lot of the poems.
Yeah, the connection, because these people are holding hands
hands
to something that's beyond them on each side too.
Right.
He writes about his children so much. I wonder if he has a son and a daughter. I don't know.
I think he does have a daughter for sure. I think that's mentioned somewhere.
Yeah.
You know, the cover reminded me of the poem, I think it's on page 53. War is not healthy for children and other living things.
Mhm.
Oh, it looks to me like they've reconstituted themselves and they're getting ready to walk out of the forest, just like they are in that poem.
Oh, that's interesting. You want to? Is there like a passage from that poem, Alice? That
Yeah. Let me see if I can find it. I think this is the one. Oh, nope, they got the wrong one. It's they dug up their joy and buried it again. Oh, the kids walked out. They walked out of the driveway. You know, they wound up burying all these things. They buried guns.
right?
They buried body parts. But then at the very end, they dug up their joy and buried it again. And their sadness, anxiety, and the memories of their friends on roller coasters and their friends smoking dope, they were naked. And in the springtime, when the snow had melted and the sun was warm, the forest floor burst with caterpillars and ferns. See the ferns in the picture?
Mm.
And the kids walked out, back out from the forest floor. They were filthy and naked, and there was so much green, it was blinding. Anyway, it did remind me of that. It's probably because of the ferns.
Mm-hmm. That's good. I like that. Anybody else? Well, let's talk. Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, I just really liked the title of the book, and the titles of so many of his poems are so engaging. He's really, really good at titling.
I agree.
He's good at first lines too. Every first line just about was a punch, and made you want to know what he was going to do with it after that. I think that's hard to do. Someone will love you many times. Today I looked at people. Tony Hoagland wrote a poem called Dickhead. It doesn't matter how much Van Morrison you listen to. Don't you just want to know what?
Actually, I think it does matter.
Robert Clemente kicked my ass last night. That's another one.
That was So his brain just must go all over the planet. So much popular culture in here, but then he hits home with universal truths, and he'll have big ideas and little details all in the same poem.
It reminds me of that other poet that we read, David Kirby.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Me too.
Very much in that same vein with the titling and the lines and the conversational style and the references to pop culture.
I agree.
Yeah, Sandy and I were talking before about the pop culture references in poems, and whether for a poet who does that, I wonder what the pitfalls are, or what they would think the pitfalls would be. But I forget who it was. Maybe Kathleen, you said something about the universal themes at the same time, and these details. It's like he can take the pop culture references, which might be or could be fleeting or trivial
Yeah.
things, but all of a sudden ground them in something that just really makes them pop.
Yeah, they're like a springboard, like the shuttlecocks playing badminton, and death is in there. And I love that poem.
I did wonder though, you like to think your poems will live for 1,000 years. Oh, and that pain thoughts will find honey peace in them. But I don't know, when you pile as many contemporary references as he does, for someone who doesn't recognize the references, there's going to be a scampering back, a looking up. Oh, and I don't know how that's going to let it age. That's the only thing I think would be the caveat.
Well, that'll be solved by Alice. That'll be solved by Google, right? So maybe the poem will be in a database somewhere, but every word that needs to be expanded upon, you can just hover your mouse over that word or that name, and then there'll be a little pop-up window that that has right.
Provide
So-
everything you need.
Yeah.
Well,
And pop up music on this one.
Yes. Oh yeah.
a lot of things, like in the infinite joke of a freezing rain of shuttlecocks. I mean, Van Morrison is contemporary, but he's not. He goes back 30 years, and same thing with Rothko. Rothko's 60s and 70s painting. So there's still some universality within it's not like Tennyson or something, but it's like if somebody mentions the song Stardust. Well, my parents listened to that, but I still know, I know who it is. I think we could have a pretty good lifespan.
But I think Alice is correct though, because I always hesitate to put anything that I know is, I don't know, very contemporary, I guess, that might date it, because I always have this fear, not in any way comparing myself to T.S. Eliot, but four quartets. It's just like, what? And you have to look up every other line. And I don't want somebody to have to do that to my poem. I mean, these are great. People get them now, and like our generation and maybe, the next one coming up. But, in 100 years, I don't know. And that's, of course, if you're writing for people now, then, you need to write to what we're going through now, as opposed to hopefully somebody sometime in the future is going to read this.
He even puts his age in his poems. And I don't know if I would do that or not, because when I, in front of my big audience, would I fudge my age when I read that thing? Because he'd say, I'm 52. And then another, he says, I'm 53. So when he reads that poem 5 years later, Is he going to say, I'm 52, I'm 53 in that poem, or is he going to change the age? Something like that, you know, the contemporary references, you know, they kind of throw me a little bit. But maybe it's because he's a dude.
Yeah.
I like them so much, though, is that they seem so innovative. They seem so original.
I was surprised that he actually uses the entire English language, that he's not afraid to say whatever he feels like saying, and he doesn't correct himself, which is what I would do. But so it's refreshing, but at the same time, some people may be offended. I don't know.
I thought that he had an interesting conversational tone. And at the same time, when you look at the poems closely, he does this kind of pickup. I don't know what you call it. It's not always at the end of a line. It's hardly ever at the beginning of the line, but he'll pick a word and then he'll pick that back up. Or he'll use a line as kind of a refrain. What do you call it? A coda to stanza after stanza, so that there's something that threads and glues through it. Even though it seems as though it's a conversation.
Yeah.
Albeit a conversation with himself.
I think he writes a lot about his children, an awfully lot, especially for a man. That surprised me, you know.
Well,
Man in his 50s, about his children.
Yeah. What surprises me about him is how romantic and sentimental he is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And protective. I mean, he's just, you can tell he frets about his kids' safety, and he's very vulnerable in that respect.
And not just kids, he talks about cooking a lot. There's a lot of ingredients in his lists, which I liked.
Mm-hmm.
I think he doesn't take himself too seriously. So
Right.
saying I'm 52 or 53 or whatever, that probably doesn't, concern him that much. He even says, he talks about he's fat somewhere in here. And so he has a real freedom about who he is. And even saying in one of the poems, which I really like, with Blonde for All the Boys, about having some kind of a vulnerability with other men, and not being afraid to cry in front of another man. I love that about his work.
Mm-hmm.
And I think because he talks about his children, he is a high school English teacher, and he's in the world of adolescence, and I feel like he feels very protective to the generation that he's teaching and raising. And I'm seeing that reflected a lot in these poems.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was a good poem.
Andy, you want to read those lines? We were talking about those earlier.
Yeah, so I just love these lines so much. So the poem Blonde for All the Boys,
Page 49.
right, on page 49, and the kind of towards the end of that, he's having this kind of conversation with this other man and they're having a together moment, and he wants the man to keep being vulnerable and keep being in the moment with him. And he says, in my mind I was saying, come on Dave, you can do it. Some weird desire in me to be in a room with another man who cries. You see why I am so desperately alone in this world. I mean, that's so beautiful, revealing, vulnerable.
But also wickedly funny too. You can see why I'm so
There's a
desperately
little
alone in this world.
Yeah. In my mind, I was saying, come on, you can do it. Yeah, there's that little bit. But then with the desperately alone in this world, it turns immediately to something very solemn and serious. And beautiful. Like he cares and feels that deeply and is not afraid to say it. You know, and at the end of the poem, doesn't matter what color Frank Ocean's hair was, pink, green, blonde, for all the boys who want to cry, then sit up in bed and cry. I just really like it.
Here's an example. I did not look up Frank Ocean, and I did not listen to Self-Control, and I never heard it, I think, but the poem still resonates for me.
Yeah.
You know, even though I don't get those specific references.
Yeah. In that poem, I think you can read into it and figure it out.
Go back to that
Where's the one?
question, not to belabor it. So you have allusions to, I mean, if I have allusions, as I do in my own poetry, to Rilke or, you know, all manner of authors and poets and philosophers. And so it's almost as though it's a ranking of the allusions that are from knowledge or high culture or something like that. Those are okay in poetry. They'll last through the centuries, but an allusion to, you know, some pop star or something like that that's contemporary.
I think he froze up.
Yeah, you're freezing up. Yeah.
It really may depend on how much they last. You know, he says Mingus. I think Mingus
I don't
is
know. I
a long
mean,
time.
do we make what? Yeah.
I don't know if it's Jeff or us.
Yeah.
You're going in and out, Jeff.
I'm here. Oh, okay.
We didn't hear part of that.
He froze up.
Oh, I would just say, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
No one can ever. Well, I mean, that's an illusion now, right?
What was he talking about?
So I guess
Oh,
I guess I'm just kind of curious, what do allusions to Shakespeare? Okay, that's acceptable, but
Mhm.
an allusion to Madonna, nah. So
It might matter too what your point is. I mean, does the illusion really matter if they get it? Like Kathleen was saying, that one didn't even matter, but you know how important it is to the context.
yeah,
Or
so
maybe
that's a good point.
who he envisions his audience as being, who he wants his audience to be. I mean, maybe he doesn't care about older women, you know, I mean, that's not that he doesn't care, but that's not who he's pitching to. He might just pitch into a hipper, younger crowd, which is his choice.
I noticed one of the magazines that he publishes frequently in, they take a lot of experimental and hybrid poetry. And so the magazine itself might be one of the determining factors, you know, that they would appreciate the more contemporary references.
what magazine is that?
Green Mountains Review
Okay.
out of Vermont. He had several poems to appear there. And also American Poetry Review. He's had a lot there as well. And, you know, they're either really wacky or, you know, been reading them for years. They have some really unusual things.
Always when I read something like this, like when we read David Kirby's, I think how I am, as a writer, I'm not very courageous. You know, it encourages you to get out there a little bit more, follow your brain a little bit, your mind, and notice some things around you that are fleeting, that aren't, you know, the oak tree, something a little more specific. I like them a lot. I mean, the ocean is a flower called Roberto Clemente. That's like a dream sequence. You know, it's so different.
I thought of that one as an elegy. I also thought of The Age of the Bullet as an elegy.
Yeah.
Thought that was a very powerful poem.
And an incredible ending with The Ocean is a Flower. I was 7. I have been 7 ever since.
Yes.
Oh man, I just love that. That was one of my favorite poems.
Hmm.
You know, one of the things I wondered about the book was, I mean, there are 3 sections, and so then we have mesmerizingly, sadly beautiful, and I was trying to figure out a way to look at the sections. You know, like maybe section 1 was the mesmerizingly, and section 2. I don't know. Did anybody do that? Think about it in that way?
I tried to look at it and see what the difference was on the sections. Um, I really didn't come up with anything that was definitive.
Yeah.
I thought the the last part seemed to be a little bit more personal, maybe. Um, there's more that connects, but I started to say there was more that connected with kids. Um, his NASCAR poem made me think he had a daughter.
Yeah.
Oh, there's one where he was talking about his wife's tattoo.
Yeah.
But then, you know, the one that I was talking about before, oh, the one where the kid got shot. Oh,
Bullet.
yeah, that one's equally personal, and it's in a different section.
Yeah.
So I don't know. He does, at least in the first section, uh, commit to the whole idea of love being something that you want happening, from fixing up the basement,
Mhm.
um, to just, I think there were about 3 or 4 hours and hours of grass. Someone will love you many times. Those 3 seem, you know, really to affirm this idea of love. But then he picks that up again in part 2 with a first true love big problem. Um, I just, you know, I thought there were a lot of them where you could have put them in one section or another section, and maybe you just did 3 sections to have a break in between. I don't know. What'd you think? Could you make it fit the other way?
Are you asking me, Alice?
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I don't know that I came to any conclusion about that at all. I think I always try to take a book for what it is, you know, just okay, here's what it is, and maybe the poet had an arc in mind, knowing, of course, even in my own books, how often I've rearranged and reshuffled before something goes to print, and you can kind of talk yourself into any kind of argument. But yeah, there was a part of me that wonders, like, does he begin the book the way he does with that specific poem because it kind of grabs a reader, right?
Yeah.
Except, and you know, and I shouldn't say this out loud, but the second poem for me, maybe it would have been the poem if it had been my book and I'd written all these poems. I might have started with that second poem because I just love it so much, and I'd want it to cast itself over everything.
Yeah.
But the logic of how it actually does begin, it's also worthwhile. This guy Lev at the dinner party said, and so that's so characteristic of a lot of the book anyway, just as a first line, right? And maybe there's a contrast that's going to be set up between hey, here's what someone at a dinner party says. And then throughout the book, there are so many things that he says from all the different variations of himself, even the 7-year-old. I've been 7 ever since.
Yes.
I don't know. I mean, there's so many ways that one could talk oneself into an arc or an overall argument through a book. I do think that beginning the 3rd section with the title poem, yeah, yeah, that seemed wonderful when I reached it.
Yeah.
And this is a book too that I read in a way that I think we've talked about this. I don't tend to read a book straight through. I just don't. But I did this one. I don't know why.
Well,
maybe
this
I- yeah.
book is so compact. There are only, I think I counted, there were 28 poems.
Yeah.
It's not a very long book.
Yeah.
So when I looked at the sections, I wondered if he needed the sections, because generally you section off a longer book. So I wondered if he needed that kind of pacing to divide it up into thirds. But yeah, I agree with you, Jeff. Those first 2 poems, they're just stellar. It's like he couldn't decide. How many books are you going to write where you have 2 poems that are so stellar? You could open with either one. I could just tell with those 2 poems, it's like either one of those, and so he's going to put them both in the front. But then by the time I got to that part 3 there, I thought he's running out of a little steam, maybe.
Even the 3rd poem though, we buy all the hours and hours of grass. We buy all this food, thousands of acres of grapes and rolled oats before they are rolled, and all the way down through there. I love the part about toward the very end. I'm sure there are kids in other worlds that could not conceive of the barrel of stuff which lives in the front yard. I want to go there, wherever there is, with my kids, sit them down inside a stone building and say, look, there's one dinosaur in the corner. That's it. Her name is Francois. And then there is the grass. I just love that. Hours and hours of grass right outside. Go to it. Be in it. I mean, this is all of our generations now need to be told this, right? Soft and quiet and wild. Make boats and computers and oceans and blankets. Then when you come home hungry and tired, we will eat the same chicken and dates. Those and figs and moonbeams. Moonbeam. I love that. That comes out of nowhere. And that will be everything. No joke. It will be all you get. It sounds parental, right?
That's a lot of that. And, it's just surprised me.
And, that poem would have been a fascinating first poem also. But for the ecological and I connected to the poem later about, is it bored and what's the name of that poem? Glorious and bored. Everybody's, nobody looks up. Everybody's looking at a screen. So some great choices to frame a book. But maybe this is something we can ask him about, the arrangement and how the decision-making process went. Knowing, of course, we just throw them up and it's like, oh, that's a good option.
He has you can tell a lot of environmental concerns. He has a lot of gun and violence concerns, and struggles with technology.
I was looking at his poem, Roe versus Wade, and because the first line caught me, my daughter is a tattoo artist. So I looked at that and I found it very interesting with that title to be so concentrated on tattoos, but it was all about what you do with your body. And I think finally on the second page of the poem, it comes to the line where everywhere across the country, women will no longer have a right to their bodies. And so I really liked how he was weaving in and out of the tattoo thing, but at the same time, he had lines like, the death of humanity was everywhere, in the human throng, in the human garbage of love and beer. The tattoos were everywhere. And that kind of caught my attention. And I thought, because I was interested in how he can talk about everything, yet still say meaningful things in his poems. And I mean, he even talks about the Bible in this poem, and in other poems that he has, he talks about the Bible. He brings in everything, and it's just amazing to me how he does that.
You can read any poem you love that you want to, because I'd love to hear you read. I love the way you read that passage even.
And I thought, Helga, I agree with what you said with Roe versus Wade, but I saw a connection with that poem to bodies are things to rescue themselves, which is on page 41. I just found that that poem was interesting too. When my daughter caught her body falling down the stairs, she stopped it. Bodies are things to rescue themselves and other bodies next to them. It's very interesting.
And those are just they're first and foremost beautiful lines, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they're also just surprising.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how to explain. It seems so perfectly said and simple, except I could have never gotten there, myself. Like, how? That's just a great passage.
Or would you dare to write such a simple line? That line about, I love your face. It's a beautiful face. I love your face. It is a beautiful face. I mean, that's so simple. Does that border on cliche? I like it anyway. Would I have the guts to close a poem with that and send that off somewhere?
No.
Maybe you should try it.
Try it, yeah. In the Roe v. Wade poem, I'm trying to find the little passage, but it has to do with being, everywhere was everywhere, and we were exhausted. That sense of exhaustion, and then on page 11 in the poem, still, toward the very end of that page, there's that, those. A line unto itself, right, as its own stanza. I'm saying I'm tired. We are all tired. And there is a kind of, at times, that maybe that theme is threaded through this book too. What are we exhausted by?
Mm-hmm.
Even a debate like Roe v. Wade is, maybe a lot of people are just tired of even that, right? Having arguments about the body or whatever. What else do we want to mention or raise questions about?
My favorite poem here was The Saving on page 13. Mm-hmm. And I think Kathleen kind of pointed to this poem earlier about the idea of him being so parental and so concerned about his children, but yet in this poem it flips back and forth between who's saving who. Are your kids saving you, or are you saving your kids? And I love that play there. And it was Stark, the way he would, simple lines, Stark, the way he would address that. But it was just something that kind of took me on a ride. I thought it was beautifully done.
Mhm.
Well, I know the issue of humor has been mentioned, or I know Sandy and I were talking about that before the meeting. I'm looking at the Human Snowblower poem, page 19. So what that David Letterman's got a big white beard. I'm the human snowblower.
Yeah.
There's something like that he does. I don't know, like syntactically, I'd have to look at those types of constructions where like maybe there's a compound. This is not one, but maybe a compound sentence where the first part of it, we're grounded and it's okay, I'm with you, and then there's a comma and an and or something, and then what comes after it's like, okay, well, how'd you get there? But actually, what was it? There was something I was reading of his online. Oh yeah, did y'all look this up? He does these parking lot poems that are on YouTube. He reads them. He writes a poem in the parking lot and then he reads them and posts them on YouTube. But there's 4 lines at the beginning of one of his poems, and I wrote them down. It said, "Down by the river of Wendy's and McDonald's, I wanted a grass-fed burger, but couldn't find a canoe to take me to Vermont." And it's like the first half of that, down by the river of Wendy's and McDonald's, I wanted a grass-fed burger. Okay. But couldn't find a canoe to take me to Vermont. Again, it's humorous, surprise, a sense of surprise that comes out of that. And I guess maybe what I'm getting at is juxtaposition. Like he juxtaposes things sometimes that you wouldn't necessarily put together. I mean, how do you go from, Dave Letterman's Netflix to I'm the Human Snowblower? Oh, okay. Stupid human tricks. Maybe that's how he got there. I'm having an epiphany in the middle of my epiphany. I'll ask him about
There's
that.
a line of poetry for you right there. I'm having an epiphany
Oh, yeah.
in the middle of my epiphany.
I called dibs.
I got
Wait a
a
minute, I
sense
actually
out
said
of this.
it is mine.
I thought
I
the
got a
white
sense
beard
out of
made
this
him
that
think-
there,
Oh,
sorry.
Go
I
ahead,
got a
Claudia.
sense out of this that there was almost more of a satirical feel than a comedic feel to a lot of the poems.
Okay.
And I know that can be a very subtle difference, but I think it's an important difference. And just like with the poem that you just mentioned about wanting to go up to Vermont for a grass-fed burger, that's satire to me.
Okay.
And that's kind of how I reacted to his book. I responded to it as being satire.
Interesting.
I just thought every poet's fantasy was to be on a TV talk show, be interviewed by somebody famous, and that was his little imaginative contribution there to the genre. Doesn't everybody have a poem about what they would say in their famous TV interview or their Nobel Prize acceptance speech or whatever?
Had it all planned out.
You've already got it practiced. So he wants to be on Letterman, you know, that's his.
Well, at the end of the
That's
poem,
his
he flips it
fantasy.
around, doesn't he?
Yeah.
All I want to do is go inside to my living room and have my own talk show.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, David Letterman, you know, it's like he would be the one introducing Letterman to come
Yeah.
onto his show.
In the last poem, Grace, I can really appreciate that. You know, it's like first world problems. People are complaining about something, and you know, he says he wants to yell hunger, he wants to yell Auschwitz, you know, he wants to yell Parkland, and that sort of reality check notion of, you know, it's like when I was little and they'd say, you know, you wouldn't eat your food or you'd be complaining about something, and people always said to you, the adults always said to you, well, people in Africa are starving. You know, that was sort of the comeuppance statement, but it reminded me of that. My daughter yells that there are not enough bubbles in her bath. I scream hunger.
I liked that one too.
My wife takes issue with the way I clean the pot. I say Parkland. You know, get it in perspective. Put it in perspective, you know, your little problems.
Meanwhile, we have to get better at being born.
Mm-hmm.
I was thinking about how many musical references are in here. You know, there's Mingus, Astro Weeks. That's why you have to buy your kid Astro Weeks. Van Morrison. And, I guess what made me think of that is, Catherine, your comment. It seems a little bit of a kind of an echo of Dylan. You know, he not busy being born is dying or whatever. Y'all know that quote. But there are a lot of musical references in this, and I know he did a TED talk about music. You expect him to do it about poetry, but it was actually about music.
What did he
You
say
know, we
about
talked
music?
about,
What about music?
I'm just thinking that there's so many references to musical. I mean, I guess that's another pop, you know, references to contemporary details, but maybe the role that music plays in shaping our minds and the musicality of language, even. But music as a kind of touch point for how we understand the world or understand our relationships. I'm just thinking off the cuff here. I mean, Frank Ocean didn't mean anything to me till Dave said, check out Self-Control.
What about his infinite references in The Infinite Joke of a Freezing Rain of Shuttlecocks?
Yeah.
That one coming after another.
infinite jest.
I wondered about that.
Seemed a tip of the hat to, you know, we talked about his first lines being so strong, as the last lines are really pretty potent. I will catch you in your breaking.
Yeah.
I noticed on his website, he was offering poetry workshops, and he said that he would pay particular attention to your last lines, that they were very important.
Nothing is important, and the soft tissue is everything. You know, it's funny though, he doesn't write about teaching. If I had just picked this book up, I'd have thought, I don't mean to sound sexist, but he sounded like a stay-at-home dad. He was cooking and he was writing about the children a lot. He was worried if they're safe. I mean,
Yeah, I had to look it up and see what he did for a living, because I really wondered,
yeah,
if he did the usual.
yeah. That's how I pictured him, sort of being the house husband. Don't tell him I said that.
I love the talking about the endings. I love the ending of Joyride on page 43, 44. That particular poem. You got the woman that goes halfway out of the plane, right?
Mm.
Um,
So he does mention teaching in this poem. I'm not teaching physics.
oh, yeah. The ending of that story about a woman who had been half sucked out of a broken airplane window at 28,000 feet. For 3 minutes, two men tried to pull her back in. When she was safely in the plane, one administered CPR and one said, "I'm here." Imagine what she saw out there all alone. Um, you know, that idea of aloneness or lonely that was mentioned earlier, Sandy, in that other poem. But just moments like that come up. The atmosphere smashing into her face at 268 miles an hour. I was thinking a plane would probably be going faster, but imagine her mind and the absence of her mind. I thought that was a wonderful line.
Mhm.
And then when they interviewed the pilot of the plane, she said, "The engine exploded and I saw the angels going past me really fast." Love that, the ending of that.
So that poem's a good example of the juxtaposition. He calls it on his website, I think he calls it the imaginative leap there. He has the person who owns the vehicle doing the reading of the story in the newspaper to get him to that second story. And I thought for sure he would try to come back to the first story, but he doesn't. He leaves it at the second story.
Well, they're all defying the laws of physics.
Oh, yeah.
You know, we're defying the law of gravity. Oh, he's spinning like he might take off into the atmosphere. You know, she's about to take off into the atmosphere.
Yeah.
Doing my best to mess with the magnetic pull of Earth with the law of least resistance because I was not resisting. Oh, making love to the world in hopes I could get to the other side, the side where I no longer felt like I owned anything, which is when I crashed into the sycamore at the end of the lane. Oh, I'd moved into one end of the tree and out the other end, right through it. You know, that's there are all these lovely things that people who are really into sci-fi or super physics fantasize about moving your atoms. Oh, I don't know.
Hmm.
Coming out at the other end. And then the story is this woman who'd been half sucked out of a broken airplane window. And the mind and the absence of mind, and the engine exploding, and the angels going past really fast, according to the pilot of the plane. They just seem parallel to me in a wonderful way. And
I wonder if one of those angels' name was Barry. He's Greenberry.
how many of you have been in a car wreck? Besides me.
Oh, who's been in a car wreck?
Yeah. You know what? There's a point when you feel like your whole life is just kind of spooling. Didn't happen for you guys, huh?
I haven't been in that bad of a car wreck.
No.
Little ones, not big ones.
Yeah.
You know, Alice, in that poem you were just reading,
Yeah.
You mentioned earlier, and I think you read over a line that does what you were talking about at the bottom of 43, making love to the world in hopes that I could get to the other side, to the side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I skipped over that part.
Yeah, those are little echoes of words that have at the end of one line and pick back up with it. But the line I love in this poem is on 44, right after the passage where you ended, Alice. And the world had answered. Thing is, it was no answer. It was just the world, and I was an idiot in it. And I love that. Partly because it's probably for this book, it's a really rich line because there's so much that is incomprehensible in good ways and in bad ways, right?
Yeah.
It's incomprehensible that someone will love you many times. Someone's going to love you a million times or whatever. But also it's incomprehensible with guns and somebody running over somebody with a truck. The violence and other things that are part of it you do feel like an idiot. This is the world we're in, and it's absolutely beyond us.
And that's very parallel with the title of this poem, the incomprehensible, mesmerizing, and sad at the same time. Beautiful.
Yeah, there's the country music singer Darryl Worley, who's from my hometown, Savannah, Tennessee, but he had a song many years ago where he says, I love this crazy, tragic, sometimes awful, magic, or almost magic, awful, beautiful life. I love this crazy, tragic, sometimes almost magic, awful, beautiful life. So a kind of wonderful mixture of all those words.
That reminds me, there's a poem 30 through 32, and you moaned a little moan, where he starts out, one day you're going to die. And then he looks at the things that make people happy and the way people respond. There's the whole thing of, you might be in a hospital bed, the young one bored out of her mind because she wanted to be in a meeting at a fancy restaurant. Oh, but that she loves you, and so that's okay.
Yeah.
And then he goes through all these things because you never know. You really don't know. You can be crossing the street and that car could smash into you, the way he's thinking about that. And then he goes over and says, I have a friend, his brother's dying. It means nothing. It means everything. It's the world. It's not the world. And I thought he really caught the contradictions that he plays with a lot in that. And when he says, I wonder if death is just an inconvenience, at first you think about it inconveniencing the person who's dying. And then he goes back to the same kind of thing that he was imagining in the second stanza. Only he says, when my grandmother died, I was on the way to the pharmacy to get toothpaste and she died. So I had to go to her apartment. And you think, what a jerk. But then he's being incredibly honest. It's like, I was sad. I was annoyed. I need to say I'm sorry to her, but she's been dead for 10 years. And then at the last part, he sort of reconciles the human connection and the worldly connection, I think, when he says, I'll come to your funeral and miss you. I'll cry. When it's over, I'll go to the store and buy Brillo pads for tomorrow night's greasy dishes. And that's an interesting juxtaposition. It's important. Nothing is important. And the soft tissue is everything.
Yeah, a great line.
That's
Great ending to that poem.
Yeah.
Again.
Yeah. But Alice, when you use the word contradictions, and that I think that's probably something I've been trying to find my way to saying about this book, right? That there are all these, the juxtapositions or contradictions kind of bouncing off of one another that in kind of wonderful ways, but jarring at times too, you know. We haven't talked necessarily about the title poem on page 47, Mesmerizingly Sadly Beautiful, which has some of the, you know, that I love reading a book of poem. Well, first of all, I just love reading a book of poems. It's like, what else is better than that? But I love reading a book of poems because, you know, you come across lines, you know, like I read, and then sometimes I read and I just stop. Like I can't finish yet. I just stop. Y'all do that? Like you just stopped by a line. And this poem had, I mean, there are lines in other poems that stopped me, but man, this one really did have the lines. The Hudson River put its face into the sunset and screamed.
Yeah, boy.
Yeah.
If I'd have thought of that one first, wow, that's and then the variation of that a little bit later too.
Yeah. All right.
Okay.
So well, Matthew is here. I'm going to admit him. We'll see if he can come in.
Hello.
There he is.
Hello.
Hey.
Hi,
Hi.
Matthew.
Can you hear me?
Welcome.
We've just been talking about you.
Thank you for joining us.
Oh, how's the weather in Tennessee?
Pretty
Cold.
cold and snowy.
Oh,
16 degrees.
11.
not normal, right?
From the south.
No, not normal.
I'm so sorry. I know your pain. I live in Boston, so it's my whole winter life.
A friend of
No,
mine
but
told
in
me,
Boston, they plan for it. In
That's
Tennessee,
correct.
they think, oh, we might have a sprinkling. We don't have sand. We've got salt, a little bit.
Yeah. You need a lot of salt. You need a lot of sand.
I had a friend tell me once when I first moved to Washington, D.C., and she told me, Washington is a town for Southerners without courage. New York is a town for Southerners with courage, and Boston is for Northerners.
It makes a lot of sense.
Well, Matthew, we enjoyed your book very
Thank
much.
Yes,
I appreciate
yes.
that. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, we have a few questions,
Sure.
and I think, well, I want to start with, there's 3 sections in this book,
Correct.
and we were curious if you saw these sections as working in some like separate way, or was there an overriding arc, or was there any connection with the title, Mesmerizingly and Sadly and Beautiful? Or what could you tell us about the sections and how this book is ordered?
I have to be honest. Oh God, it was so long ago. All I can say honestly about that is that I'm in love with the number 3, and it was the number of my favorite shortstop on the New York Mets growing up. I don't know, and so it just it's got the whole biblical thing to it, and I just like to break my books up into sections of 3.
Okay.
And in each of those sections, I'm trying to have as little, a small amount of poems as possible. Because I believe in books. I believe that poetry books should err on the side of being shorter rather than longer.
Okay.
So that's all I can tell you. There's no like narrative arc or thematic arc or any of that in this book. I mean, if you saw something fantastic, maybe you can illuminate me, but I don't have, I can't say anything other than that.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's good. Just break it into three
Break it into
parts.
three.
In
worked.
other places, you've talked about the three. Was it the three rule or the three thing rule or something?
Yeah, somebody made that up. I mean, somebody put that up on the website. I just had a conversation with somebody once about that, and
Yeah.
somehow it turned into an internet thing. I believe in getting three strands or braids into your poems and weaving them together to make something cool and neat.
Well, I was, the thing I read that talked about this says they're, one thing from the garden, one thing from the heart, one thing from the trash can.
Yes.
And it seems like, well, that seems to fit your poetry.
My poetry, yeah. First the heart. First the heart. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. So, like a poem's like a loaf of braided bread, right? I mean, it's supposed to give you some sustenance, and the best poems are, I think. So, yeah, the number 3.
Cool.
You've done some research, Jeff.
I've been a fan for a lot of years. When your first book came out years ago, I remember I got a copy of it, and
Appreciate that.
I
Got them all.
American
Oh,
Jew,
yeah.
Salami Jew. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. I appreciate that.
Well, here's a question. Did
Yeah.
you have input on the cover?
I did not. That's interesting. I tried to, and they were like, "Goodbye, go away."
Really?
Yeah, which I appreciate, because my first book, Saraband, they said, if you go, make it happen, and it turned out to be more work than I wanted to be involved with. You had to get artist permission, and they wanted money, and Saraband Four-Way just took care of it all. They're an amazing press.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We love the cover.
Yeah, it's a
We
beautiful
thought
cover.
that really, really worked
Yeah,
really well. So we were
Yeah.
appreciative of that.
yeah.
But we just wondered if you
No, nothing.
had anything.
Yeah,
Well, they did good by you then.
they did. They hooked me up big time. Yeah, they took care of me. They took care of me.
We were talking about all the pop culture references
Yes.
in the book, and we were wondering what you felt about. Do you feel like there's any pitfalls or issues in having so many pop culture references, as far as the longevity of, the poems?
Oh, I see.
Someone looking at it years later and wondering,
Who's
or
it?
how do you feel about that?
Yeah. I actually never thought about that. I mean, I try to be as relevant as possible in my work. And one of the reasons I try to be as relevant as possible is because my day job is, I teach 11th and 12th graders. And I always imagine, or I have this fantasy that they are my audience, right? And because they're the most relevant people on the planet right now, at least in their lives, that youth is everything, and I want them to be able to connect to the work, and so there's a connection for me about being accessible and having pop culture people in the work. So I don't worry about, because I don't really think my poems are going to be read in 50 years. I don't worry about that. It's right now. We're here in the now. So, and I'm I love listening to music and art, and art and movies. So all that stuff resonates with me. So it just naturally finds its way into the work.
Right.
It's all organic. At least I hope it is.
Do you share your poetry with your students?
I used to, but I don't as much anymore. I try. I'm a little older now, and I feel like should be more of a boundary, but I don't really share my work with my students. I share my friends' work with my students, but not my own.
Do you teach English? Is that what you teach?
Yeah, I teach English
Okay.
to 17 and 18-year-olds,
Ah.
and they know everything. So, and I know nothing.
Yeah, I think in one of these poems, doesn't it say like you're an idiot or something like that?
Oh yeah, all of my poems, I refer to myself as an idiot. Because that's just the truth, right? I mean, that's the truth. Yeah.
One thing that we really appreciated with these poems was the first lines. We thought you had like amazing first lines and ending lines as well in a lot of the poems that were just really spectacular.
Thank you.
So how does creating these, I mean, like, do you just come up with a first line that you think is great and then the poem unfolds from there? Or how does the process work with while you're writing these poems?
It's a great question. The first lines are, the first lines are a lot easier than the end lines or the ends of poems. And usually a line will pop into my head, and it feels, or I'll say something or I'll hear something, and the thing that gets me is the music of it, and then I'm off and running. I don't even know what the poem's going to be about. So, I mean, like the first poem, right? I don't know if it was the first line, right? If you don't want your kids to have sex, don't finish the basement. That guy actually said that at a dinner party. You know, and I was like, I'm stealing that, man. Is that all right? And he was like, yeah, take it, no problem. And I feel very strongly about the first line being a hook. I mean, if you can get that that music and that imagery to do something that creates a bit of interest, some tension, then you got your reader, and you can pretty much do anything you want. The end of poems, I still struggle with. They're so hard. Endings are so hard. I haven't figured endings out. I mean, you know, the tendencies to get sentimental, or, you know, you try and wrap things up, and none of that works. So you guys know that poem, Lying in a Hammock, the James Wright poem, I've wasted my life, you know, like, I mean, that's a pretty simple poem, but that ending, what that ending does is sort of what I hope all of my endings will do. You surprise the reader, you jerk them away from some ambiance, some mood, some tone you've created, and you know, you split people open that way. But it's really hard to do. Yeah.
Or make them go back, and the last line is so compelling that now you have to go back and reread the poem.
Yeah.
You know, send you back into the poem.
Yeah.
Kind of a feedback loop.
Yeah.
I think you're successful though in a lot of these as far as the ending, no matter how, you know, how hard it was to write, we were really drawn in, you know, to several of these, like the Ocean is a Flower, called Robert Clemente. I was 7. I have been 7 ever since.
Yeah.
That's a wonderful ending for that poem.
Yeah, I appreciate that. You know what's interesting? I write real quick, so I'll write a poem, 15 minutes, I'm done with it.
Lucky you.
I know.
Ooh.
That's just the way it's always been that way. And that poem, I love that poem, but the ending really, I don't even remember what the first ending was. And I think there was a whole other stanza. And one day, I don't know, I think it was going over the galleys of this book. I'm like, no, that's the ending, right? That's the ending, that line. And the poem had been sitting around for years. So sometimes it just, you got to get real far away from something to come back to it and, you know, have it be.
Could I have a question?
Yes.
could you talk about the process of your writing a poem? You did say now that you're writing them very quickly, but you're going in so many different directions that I'm just curious how that happens.
Well, some of it, how does it happen?
That's right.
So
Yeah.
I'll try and describe this. I'm probably going to do a lousy job, but so I've been writing for seriously, regularly since I was 15 years old. So I'm 55 now. So that's 40 years of being engaged with language. And
Yeah.
I have figured out what works and what doesn't work to the point that it's just part of my DNA, right? It's like how to walk. So and that's just practice. That's just like going to the gym and working out 3-4 days a week for 40 years. So I just trust my impulses. I've gotten to the point where I trust my impulses and I know what's gonna work and what's not gonna work. But that's not where the poem starts. The poem starts from either some sonic explosion or some deep feeling or some light feeling. I just have figured out a way to put it all together somehow. And somebody once, a long time ago, maybe it was Juan Felipe Herrera, who he and I were in graduate school together at Iowa way back in the 80s. He said, Mateo, I write a poem and the next poem I write is the revision of the one that went before. Yeah. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why it's so quick. Because I don't like a poem. What's today? Tuesday. So if I read a poem on Saturday, that poem's very far away already. And I think I have a little bit of what we now call ADD or ADHD, where my mind just popping all the time. And so writing actually helps to calm it down or to contain that jitteriness, if you will.
Yeah, that's
I don't
amazing.
Mean Adderall,
yeah,
whatever.
So
amazing.
do you write every day? Do you write a new poem every day?
Pretty much. If there's 7 days in a week, I'll write anywhere between 5 and 10 poems. Yeah. And if I write 100 poems, 2 of them are ones that I feel like are worthy of reading again. Yeah. And maybe putting out there in the world. Yeah.
It's a numbers game.
Yeah. Exactly. It's all arbitrary. And yeah.
So have you always written with these uneven line lengths? Like there'll be a very short line, a very long line, and is that your style?
Yeah, I mean, that's just sort of, I hear where a line breaks in my head and then I break it. There's no other, like I'm not real concerned with rhyming or assonance or internal rhymes or meter or any of that. I just hear something in my head and it is organically, okay, break the line there.
Yeah.
And I also, for the reader, I think that, longer, shorter, it's more accessible for some reason.
It is, yeah.
I don't know what you'd call it. It's not epistrophe and it's not an aphora, but you pick words and phrases back up, and that becomes a kind of glue that some people use rhyme to accomplish. It's very nice.
I appreciate that. Yeah.
Is that something that's
real? Yeah, that
Also,
happens.
part.
Yeah, yeah. It is a glue. It's a glue. It's just a way of holding things together, you know. And for the reader, like I really, I'm really a fan of generosity. You know, I think generosity, too much poetry that I've come in contact with over the course of my life has the potential, or actually does, push readers away. It pushes readers away because it's not accessible. It's not entertaining. You have to work too hard. And I don't appreciate that in poetry. I think that's one of the great pitfalls of contemporary American poetry. And so I want to embrace the reader. I want to bring the reader close. I want to do everything in my power to have somebody stay with the poem from the opening salvo to the end, and then while that's happening, they feel something. They feel embraced, and it allows something in them to resonate. So whether I succeed at that or not, I don't know, but that's what's in my head.
I put in my notes, provocative. I put accessible but provocative. That's what I put in my notes.
Yeah. Good. It's working.
Now, who do you read? Are there certain poets you like to read, or even fiction writers to kind of spark?
Poets that I like to read. There's a tremendous poet in Vermont, a dear friend of mine, but she was a tremendous poet before she was a dear friend of mine. Her name is Karen McCadden. And I don't know, if you're looking for another poet, that you should check her out. So I read her work. I've been reading the work of Khadijah Queen. There's a book that she had, not her last book, but the book before that, called I'm So Fine. It's about being, talk about pop culture, like these beautiful prose poems about being an African-American woman in LA, and all of these interactions, real or imagined, with stars. Juan Felipe Herrera, who was my greatest teacher, even though we were students together. I read his work all the time. Michael Morse, he's a poet living and working in Brooklyn. Who have I been reading lately? Fiction-wise, I'm reading The Queen's Gambit. And Hanif Abdul-Rakib, who wrote a book about the hip-hop band Tribe Called Quest. So that's who I'm reading, or have been reading. And Obama's book. There's so many poets out there now. It's crazy.
I know.
Do you have a favorite poem in this book, Matthew?
Do I have a favorite? No, I don't. I haven't looked at this book for a year, really. It came out right when COVID hit.
Yeah.
And there were all these readings planned, and then they all got canceled.
Yeah.
I like them all. I think that there's I like the Roberto Clemente poem. I know you had asked me to read a poem, and I was thinking about reading and about what I might read, and I was going through this book, and then I started thinking about the work that I've been writing recently, and I've also been thinking about that I kind of just figured out 40 years later what poetry is all about for me, and I found it out because I have a friend who I work with who was recently diagnosed with lymphoma, and another friend of ours he's a teacher too, put together like, let's do this for Larry this week. Let's do this for Larry. So I was given, like, you have to do something for Larry. What can you, and Alex, my friend, was like, don't bring him food. We got enough. We got the food taken care of. He's like, write him a poem. So I wrote Larry this poem, and I sent it to him, and he sent me this text, and he was like, I'm sitting here with Reka, his wife, and we're just crying, you know? And then I had an experience in my class where I gave the kids an assignment where they were partnered up with somebody, and they had to write a poem based on a video, and then they had to share it with their partner and dedicate it to their partner. And it was so moving for them to write these poems for one another. And I'm like, this is it. This is what the whole ordeal is about. I'm sorry to be going on this rant. Yeah, it's really very grassroots, very villagey, all of those sentimental things. So a poem. Do you want me to read a poem from the book? Do you have any?
You can read. You can do a poem from a book or any poem that you want to share with us.
Well, do you mind if I read a new poem? Is that okay?
That would be lovely.
Great.
Okay. Oh, and here's another thing. So this is a poem called As Natural as Finland, which is based on, I used to live in New York. I grew up in New York, and there's a museum in New York called PS1. It's sort of it's in the middle of Queens. You walk in, there's this huge courtyard and a lot of installation art. I went there one day in 2000 by myself. I go into the courtyard, and there's a woman there, an artist, Pia Lindman, who has created a community sauna. She's from Finland, so that's a big part of the Finnish culture. And she was inviting people to get undressed in the middle of the courtyard and take a schwitz, you know, in the middle of New York, to have a sauna, to, you know, because for her in her homeland, it was just as natural, you know, but you get naked, whatever. And I did it. And this is what the poem is about. It's called As Nat, and to just circle back on this notion of sharing and connecting, I wrote this poem and I found her and I sent it to her, and she was so moved and happy, and she moved back to Finland. And you know, this is just why we have to write poems for one another all the time. All right, As Natural as Finland. A long time ago, I walked into the courtyard of PS1, the museum in Queens, and the artist, Pia Lindman, asked me to take off my clothes. She said, sign this, and I signed it and took my clothes off in the courtyard and got into the portable sauna she constructed with oak slabs and tarp. This was performance art, or public art, or the art of the body meets the rubble of the city. I was round in the belly, and the woman next to me was naked too. The sauna was big enough for two, and we were in there with a red sheet preventing us from seeing each other naked. But we were in the courtyard naked, so we moved the sheet aside and said hello, our bodies saying hello. This was not a sexual hello. This was not us wanting to have sex in the courtyard of PS1, known for its exhibitions of performance art. We were not exhibitionists or performers. We just wanted this to be Finland, the way people in Finland get naked and get in the sauna like they take the dog out for a walk or fall down the stairs. This was Queens, but sometimes you have to stretch things out a bit. I don't remember the woman's name, but want so badly to be naked in the world right now. It hurts. It's 8 degrees outside and it hurts. And if there was a sauna in my driveway, I'd undress, fall down the stairs and hop in. I'd invite the neighbors and their families and the postwoman and the FedEx guy, and we'd all sit around sweating, and it'd be as natural as walking the dog in Finland. Not the courtyard of PS1 where everything was always a little too much about the mind anyway. Somewhere on the internet, there is a picture of me and that woman, butt naked, getting into the sauna, flabs and boobs and flesh. It's a beautiful picture because today we're all so stuck inside, boarded up, and can only have dreams of that dry, hot air meeting the dry, naked flesh, bodies, lots of bodies, sitting together at the round table of sitting together. That's it.
Wow,
Wonderful.
Love it.
that is great.
Hey, yeah, naked. Finland.
Oh,
So
wonderful.
Wow.
thank you.
Thank you for sharing that one.
I appreciate. Yes, thank you.
Well,
COVID.
Matthew, unless you have something else for us, we can.
Yes, no, thank you very much. I really appreciate the invitation. I hope that it lived up to your expectation. And
Yes, we
Yeah.
enjoyed your work a lot.
Thank
One
you.
more question.
yes,
Oh,
So
I
much.
love the way you ended that one again. Oh, sitting together at the round table of
sitting
sitting
together.
round tables for me are partially like King Arthur
Yes,
and the whole concept of everyone's equal here. There's not going to be someone we're putting at the head or at the
Yeah.
foot. It's going to be everyone together.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just that's a really really nice ending.
thank you. I appreciate that. I miss everyone. You know, I think we all do. So
For
Yes.
sure. For sure.
Yes.
Make,
thank you so much.
make that the first poem in another book. That's a
You
great
know,
one to
I'm
begin.
gonna tell you, it is. It's the first poem in my next book.
Perfect.
Yeah.
There you
Good.
go.
Stay
Oh,
warm. I hope everything thaws out okay.
Thank you, Matthew.
All right.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Matthew.
Care.
Thank you. Have a
We
good night.
really enjoyed this book. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Well, he was wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes, that was great.
That
Yeah.
was so great. All right. Well, I think we are done. I was going to show you the cover of our next book, and I don't have it with me. Do you have it, Jeff?
No, not right here at my table. No.
Okay.
Which one is the next book? I have them both here.
Kate Daniels, right?
Daniels.
which one of Kate's?
That's it. In the months of my son's
Oh.
recovery.
Oh, that's a kicker.
Yeah, it's going to be a heavy one. But that's what we'll be doing next. And that will be, I think, March 16th. March 16th. Yeah. To verify that.
That's the Tuesday.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, March 16th, Kate Daniels. And hopefully we can ask her if she can pop in. You know her, Jeff, right? So you can,
Yeah. You want me to ask her? I'll ask her.
yeah, that'd be great. Be wonderful.
Okay.
All right. Well,
Sure.
thank you
Thank
guys
you.
for coming.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thank
Thank
you.
you.
Stay warm, and hopefully we'll
Yeah.
thaw out sometime in the next week, and we'll be back.
Yeah.
Good to
Thank
see
you all. Thank
Thanks.
you all.
Thanks.
Thanks for a good
night.
evening.
Good night.
Yes, thank you.
Sandy.
Good night.
Night.
Bye.